priest and pastor. It's my responsibility to preach the gospel. That is the calling that I received from the Lord, and that is the responsibility given to me when I am assigned to be a pastor in a parish. The church has always taught that the holiness of the minister is a major and important part of the preaching of the gospel. It also says that the validity of the sacraments are not taken away even though the minister is a sinner. But it does say that the minister's holiness is almost essential to the preaching of the gospel. It creates a trust between the people he shepherds, and that trust is precious and is in need of deep respect. When that trust is broken by others who share the same calling, it casts a shadow over my own personal role and the trust that I have come to believe I have with you. It makes it even more difficult to talk about an issue, therefore, that is affecting all of us and that harms that trust. When a high-ranking church bishop, a cardinal nonetheless, is forced to resign by an order from the Pope because of serious deeds that he did in his earlier days, this serious investigation into the life of Cardinal McCarrick asks questions like we have come to understand in politics. Who knew what and when, and why did someone rise to such a high level of office without being stopped along the way? Similar issues of sexual abuse and cover-up have cropped up all around the world. Ireland, the Church of Ireland, is no longer what it used to be at all. The Church of Chile, all the bishops of that country were called to Rome for a meeting, and recently, within this past year, they all offered their resignations to the Pope. He has accepted a number of them. And then on the heels of that comes the Pennsylvania Attorney General report that places into stark contrast the issues also about abusing priests and about records kept silent, priests being moved from place to place without being taken out of the ministry. The 300 priests documented from these dioceses are over the past 70 years. And yet there should be none. It seems as if the very pillars of the church have been shaken and even a bit cracked. A little history helps us to kind of maybe put this into some context, but in 2002, the Boston Globe broke a very important story about abusing priests and cover-up by bishops. And the church hoped that it would go away, but it would not, in the sense that maybe the priest could stop repeating these things. Psychologists have discovered that the ingrained nature of these kinds of crimes in the person is something that cannot be prevented. In a sense, it's so much a part of the DNA. Therefore, child abusers must be kept away from children. Therefore, priests who abuse must be taken out of the priesthood. The truth must be aired, and the dirty laundry that we have in our church has to come to light. Now, I'm afraid of always all the bad news when it comes to light, because it prompts so many discussions about trust in the church and trust in ministers. But I thought constantly of that simple statement that Jesus made when he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so therefore, when we confront truth, no matter what it is Jesus who brings us healing in the midst of that. So whatever still remains to come out, needs to come out, in terms of especially the accountability of the leaders in our church, especially our bishops, cardinals, and even the Pope. After the 2002 news broke, the bishops met in Dallas to create a document that would guide us through this That document still continues to dictate so many measures in the church that are helping to create an environment that is safer. When one looks at the Pennsylvania report, one sees issues that are definitely from the past. The way we deal with these issues now in the church is so different that it involves literally a cultural shift. Trainings for all ministers in the church so that they will become possible citers of any kind of abuse in the life of children when they're able to see the clues that a child might show that says there's something going on. Background checks for the ministers themselves, anyone working with children in the church, are conducted in order to make sure that these people have no record. Removal from ministry of those who have even one incident of proven sexual abuse, and reporting all of these things to the civil authorities. Carl Anderson, the Grand Knight of the Knights of Columbus, sent out a letter to all the chaplains, and I've included that letter in the bulletin today for your reading. It's 2 pages long, and so I'm going to just quote a few lines from it to give you the context, to give you some sense of his letter. He says, "These sins of commission and omission have sent the church we love, the church we serve, and the church that Jesus Christ established into convulsions. Sadly, the disgrace not only is borne by perpetrators, but it hurts us all, as does the silence of shepherds who have ignored the cries of their flocks. Too often, the needs of victims have been subordinated to distorted sense of mercy towards perpetrators or an instinct for clerical self-preservation. We must commit the Knights of Columbus to work for repentance, reform, and the rebuilding of the church. Reform must include many good ideas that have been proposed, such as a full and complete investigation of sexual abuse led by an independent commission that includes laity, complete transparency by the Catholic hierarchy into all matters of criminal sexual misconduct, past or future, an expansion of the zero-tolerance policy to include sexual activity or misconduct by clerics, including bishops and by seminarians, and a call for faithfulness to all members of the clergy, including bishops. There must also be an independent ethics hotline for reporting of criminal and other conduct at odds with Catholic teaching on the clerical state of life. And there must be protections against retaliation." Archbishop Lucas has published a letter that we are asked to read in our parishes. That letter garnered an article in the Catholic Voice in the World Herald today, telling about the letter and quoting from it. So here's the letter. "News in recent weeks have shown that a number of bishops and priests over many years have been personally responsible for the sins and crimes of sexual abuse of minors and the abuse of power. Many have been hurt and shamed by this abuse. This hurt and shame are enduring because they took place where people should have been safe and respected. My shame is deepened by the knowledge that so many in positions of responsibility and trust ignored the cries of the victims and turned away when those who are so dear to the Lord needed their protection and care. Several days ago, I met with a representative group of our archdiocesan priests. We shared experiences of the pain and anger of our parishioners. We spoke of our own desire for proper accountability and for healing in the church. I, like so many of you, my brother priests are hurt and demoralized by what we have heard. Please let me encourage us all to turn to Christ and beg His companionship in these days. I am committed to fast and pray every Thursday for mercy and healing for the church, and I have invited our priests to join me. In addition, the priests have encouraged me in my commitment to insist with other bishops of this country that there be structures put in place for judging allegations of misconduct on the part of bishops. All must be able to have a confidence that there are transparent and effective ways for bishops to be held accountable for their actions. Here in the Archdiocese of Omaha, we remain committed to the protection of children and young people and vulnerable adults. We remain committed to healing for victims of past abuse. In cooperation with members of law enforcement, we remain committed to responding deliberately and professionally to any claims of abuse. Anyone concerned with the actions of clergy or any church worker should contact the manager of victim outreach and prevention, Mary Beth Hannis. Be assured of my prayers for all of you in the days ahead, and my gratitude for the privilege of serving as your Archbishop. We put up posters that are in different places here in the church, as well as, I believe there's one in each of the bathrooms, and then there's some in the schools. And these posters basically say a similar kind of thing in terms of how do you report someone who is sexually abusing you? How do you report a kind of abuse of power? And that information is put out clearly. In particular, if it has to do with children or even adults, Child Protective Services need to be called. And then also Mary Beth Hannis is just really a fantastic lady when it comes to dealing with all of these things, is to be called as well. Discouragement, yes, it is something I feel. And I feel in a sense that I'm paranoid. And because the person I am and the way I act and all those sort of things could be taken by some people sometimes maybe the wrong way. And so I wonder, how can I even become more above reproach? So it becomes a kind of trust factor on my part in terms of how I conduct myself, and all priests are feeling the same thing. Almost to the point of embarrassment of wearing the Roman collar out in public. I feel at times, my own personal impression is that I don't think the hierarchy gets it sometimes, even at the highest levels. Maybe it takes things like this for them to finally get it. Much has changed, but still more needs to be done to restore trust. And I believe, in a prophetic kind of way, that the lay people, with the love for the church and love for Jesus Christ, will enter dynamically into the solution. I had the privilege of serving on the first Archdiocesan Review Board that was put together right after the 2002 events took place and the charter was put into effect. This review board, its responsibility is very important, and it deals not only with making sure that the charter is followed in our own diocese, but also they are the ones that receive evidence of any kind of complaint. And we received those complaints. And when we received those complaints, we acted on them. The people on that board were highly respected professionals, everywhere from the head of Project Harmony in Omaha, which is a huge operation relative to any kind of abuse, child abuse especially, to an officer on the Bellevue Police Force who did the investigating for them when it comes to these kinds of crimes, to everybody who had in any way, shape, or form a kind of touch on the issue in their professional life. And they came together on that review board to deal with these things in the first years of implementing the Dallas Charter. One of the things that had to be done as a result of that charter was that every file of every priest that ever functioned in this diocese that the chancery would have on hand needed to be reviewed. For anyone who has any kind of complaints against them that maybe weren't handled properly in the past had to be handled now. And a lot of that happened in those years after 2002. In addition, when accusations were made of a contemporary sort, those kind of investigations were conducted by people who know how to do that, like retired FBI agents. Law enforcement personnel are always brought into these issues and always asked about it, regardless of how old the situation is or how old the remembrance might be. This review board recommended actions then to the Archbishop, according to the documentations that we had. On that lay board, as I mentioned, were mostly lay people. There were only two priests, one by reason of his office as the vicar of clergy, and and the other chosen by the board itself, and I was privileged to be the one chosen in that early days of the board. So I understand what we've done. I'm probably more attuned to the whole issue, but nonetheless I'm still feeling the weight of what has happened in the past few weeks. I believe the same kind of board needs to be set up with the kind of power to act, the kind of thing that's able to do those investigatings of bishops and to make that investigation clearly open to the public to see. The virtue that I believe is germane to where we're at is the virtue of hope. One of the beautiful things, wonderful things that was about my education at Catholic University was that all of my theological learning was always in the context of history. History was always what we studied with respect to the documents, the doctrines, the beliefs of the church. And when one gets in touch with the history of the church, one marvels at the fact that we're still here. Absolutely marvels at it. We have been through some really crappy times. This is one of them. I think it is quite interesting to note that during the Aragon papacy, when the popes decided because of politics and their relationship with different civil authorities that they needed to have residence in France rather than in Rome, and then all the confusion about who was pope and all that sort of thing in those days, besides the interior corruption of the church that was going on, I find it interesting to note that it was a lay woman that told the Pope, go back to Rome. That lay woman today, St. Catherine of Siena. And so in a sense, holiness will be something that I think that comes from these kinds of things. Unfortunately, that's kind of what happens. Fortunately, it's because of crisis of people being hurt. That's a part of that dynamic. Hopefully the church will do what it can to make amends and to make sure that it's putting things into place, and already has put things into place to help us to keep ourselves in a safe environment way. You know, about 20 years ago, the seminaries, in a sense, were reformed and cleaned up, and the whole issue of homosexuality was attacked head-on in our seminaries, and such that over and over again, the teaching is, if you even have a tendency towards homosexuality, you wouldn't be allowed to serve as a priest today. So this call to holiness, I come back to that theme, is something that we all must receive in our hearts, lay people as well as clergy. Priests have to live authentic and real celibacy, and we all have to practice the virtue of chastity so that we're able to protect the most loving things in our lives, that is our children and the vulnerable adults. In the gospel today, Jesus does not change his teaching for the sake of keeping people in the church. He says, will you too leave me? And the apostle says, no, you are the Son of God. You are the Savior of the world. It is that Jesus that still guides us and still seeks to reform continually this church and bring us all to holiness.